Disasters can generate enormous amounts of waste. These can pose a serious threat to public health and safety, hinder disaster recovery and reconstruction, and affect our environment. The fast, safe, and cost-effective management of disaster waste should therefore be learned by the local government officials before a disaster strikes. In partnership with Sichuan University, Kyoto University, Lautoka City, Ateneo de Manila University, with support of the Asia-Pacific Network, the City Government of Makati, through the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office, will be featuring good practices, challenges, and recommendations from the 4 disaster waste management experts and practitioners from Fiji, Japan, Nepal, and the Philippines. They will be sharing their experience and research on dealing with waste from the recent disasters. This is Disaster Waste Management Webinar, Experience of 4 Countries.
On behalf of the City Government of Makati, Philippines, Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction, Sichuan University and the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, China, Ateneo de Manila University, Philippines, Kyoto University, Japan, and the Lautoka City Council in Fiji, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar. We are joined today by participants from 18 countries so far. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Today, we will be listening to distinguished speakers from 4 countries who will share their experiences on managing post-disaster waste. My name is Noraline Uy. I am a researcher at the International Recovery Platform and formerly with the Ateneo de Manila University. I will be moderating the webinar today. Some housekeeping guidance for our participants. You have been muted and disabled upon entry on WebEx. However, we would like to encourage you to send in your questions using the Q&A box, if possible, identifying the speaker to whom you would like to address your question to. We will be monitoring your questions and comments and will try to respond to them during the Q&A session. Before we formally begin, I would like to acknowledge the funding support of the Asia-Pacific Network for Global Change Research and Disaster Risk Reduction, or APN, and the Secretariat support of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office of Makati City in today's event. At this point, we will play a video recording of the opening remarks of the Honorable Abigail Ginay, Mayor of Makati City, Philippines. Mayor Abby, prior to becoming the local chief executive of the Business and Financial Center of the Philippines, has served Makati City as a congresswoman for 9 years, championing several bills that promoted the empowerment of local government units, the rights of women and children, consumer welfare, and modernization of the public education system. During her term as the mayor of Makati City since 2016, her administration has prioritized the integration of modern technology into the systems and operations of the city government to promote transparency and enhance the city's overall competitiveness, driven by her vision of Makati as a smart city that is progressive, inclusive, and sustainable. Let us now listen to Mayor Abby's message.
To our DRRM colleagues from the international community, officials from various local government units, delegates from the academe, fellow Makatizens, I would like to convey my warm greetings and sincere thanks to all of you for joining us in this meaningful cause. They say the difference between stumbling blocks and stepping stones is how you use it. Thus, we are grateful to be part of this virtual event that will teach us how to transform waste into useful tools to hasten recovery and rehabilitation after extreme events and disasters. On behalf of the City of Makati, I wish to express our sincere appreciation and congratulations to the esteemed members of the International Disaster Waste Management Core Group and our partners from the Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction, Ateneo de Manila University, Kyoto University, City of Lautaka, Fiji, and the Asia Pacific Network for Global Change Research for making this webinar possible. The dreadful effects of disasters have by now become familiar to us, including the large volumes of inert and hazardous debris left in their wake. This virtual event raises our hopes of being more in control of the outcome of a disaster, particularly in the efficient management of disaster debris, which is crucial to fast recovery and rehabilitation. Through proper and timely post-disaster waste management, or PDWM, response and rescue operations will be more efficient, natural resources conservation will be observed, and a long-term foundation for resilience and recovery will be established. In August 2019, Makati was one of the beneficiaries of the Asia Pacific Network for Global Change Research funded project titled Developing Capacity for Post-Typhoon Disaster Waste Management in Coastal Cities. Despite the challenges of establishing PDWM in a highly urbanized city, we are proud to say that we are currently working on creating our PDWM contingency plan through the learnings we have gained. We have also made sure to adopt global standards in our waste management protocols during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have done this through strengthening our facilities, plans and policies, and providing continuous support to our human resource. We have also boosted information campaigns through our social media pages and satellite platforms in the community to promote PDWM awareness among our citizens. I'm optimistic that through this webinar, we will be able to learn from the good practices of our host cities and adopt them in our own policies and initiatives in PDWM. Let us continue to work together in building resilience and sustainability as our lasting legacy for the future generations. Again, my warmest greetings. Mabuhay kayong lahat.
Those were inspiring words from Mayor Abby. Her proactive leadership in the disaster risk reduction and management issues of Makati City is truly admirable. This webinar is organized under the APN funded project, like Mayor Abby said, the project Developing Capacity for Post-Typhoon Disaster Waste Management in Coastal Cities in China, Fiji, and the Philippines. To give us a brief overview of the project, I would like to invite Dr. Glenn Fernandez, project leader and associate professor at the Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction of Sichuan University and the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Dr. Fernandez received his PhD in Global Environmental Studies from Kyoto University, Japan in 2015. In 2019, he was one of the 10 outstanding young men of the Philippines awardees for his research on and advocacy for youth participation in disaster risk reduction. Let us welcome Dr. Fernandez.
Thank you very much, Lenny. Okay. Can you now see my slides? Okay. Thank you very much, Lenny. Good morning, speakers. Good morning, participants. As Lenny mentioned, this webinar is part of a larger project reported by the Asia Pacific Network for Global Change Research, or APN, and hosted by the Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction, or IDMR, of Sichuan University and Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Our project's title is Developing Capacity for post-typhoon disaster waste management in coastal cities in Fiji and the Philippines. We are focusing on typhoons as it is a common hazard in the Philippines and Fiji. Annually, around 20 typhoons enter the Philippine area of responsibility. In the Philippines, we had devastating typhoons in 2009 with Typhoon Katsana, shown here in the photo. In 2013 with Super Typhoon Haiyan, the biggest disaster in the history of the Philippines. And just last year with Typhoon Vamco in November. Later, our speaker from Fiji will share about the typhoons or cyclones in the Pacific. Natural hazards such as typhoons can generate a very huge amount of disaster waste in a very short time. For example, in just a few days, Super Typhoon Haiyan resulted in 19 million tons of disaster waste, overwhelming the capacity of the affected local governments and residents to cope with the situation. Disaster waste can affect the living environment if not addressed properly. Disaster waste can lead to health and hygiene issues, contaminate water sources, and even pose fire risks. Disaster waste can also hinder emergency response, recovery from disasters, and reconstruction efforts. The reason why we are conducting our project is to help local governments to prepare in advance for future disasters that are expected to generate generous amounts of disaster waste. This capacity development project is piloted in Lautoka City in Fiji and in Makati City in the Philippines. 5 universities are involved. Lenny already mentioned these universities. So in addition to Sichuan University and Hong Kong Polytechnic University, we are joined by Kyoto University, Ateneo de Manila University, and Tongji University. Here are the aims of our project. Number 1, to promote resource conservation and resource efficiency by maximizing the recovery of reusable and recyclable materials and minimizing the residual waste that are disposed of in the landfills. Number 2, to determine the waste management training needs of the 2 cities. Number 3, to produce training materials and to deliver training based on the needs assessment. Number 4, to assist the pilot cities in developing a typhoon-specific disaster management contingency plan. And number 5, to share lessons learned through reports and journal articles and a dedicated website and through webinars such as this one we are having now. These are the expected outputs of our project that are aligned to our objectives. By the end of the project, we hope we will be able to train 100 city officials and stakeholders in disaster waste management. Here are some photos of our previous activities. We had the launching in October 2019 in Makati, as well as in Fiji. In January last year, before the pandemic, we were able to conduct our first 2 training, one in Ateneo de Manila University and another one at the Makati City Hall. Last month, we were able to conduct a virtual training for the new staff of Makati. Because of the pandemic, our 1-year project became a 2-year project, and we are targeting to end it by December 2021. Here are our next activities. We will be conducting WM contingency planning virtually in Makati and in Lautoka in the next few months. And we will continue to share lessons learned from the experience of our pilot cities. Today's webinar is just the first of a series of webinars that we will be organizing under our APN funded project. And we hope our project activities can contribute to the promotion of disaster waste management. And hopefully, we want to see you again in our future webinars. Thank you very much and belated Happy Earth Day. Thank you, Lenny.
Thank you, Glenn, for the overview of the project and for leading this very important work on developing capacities for disaster waste management. Let us now proceed to the country presentations. We commemorated the 10th year anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami this year. To share with us the learnings on disaster waste management from the Great East Japan earthquake, we have Dr. Misuzu Asari. Dr. Asari is an associate professor at the Graduate School of Global Environmental Studies of Kyoto University in Japan. She is a board member and secretariat organizer of the International Committee of the Japan Society of Material Cycles and Waste Management. Based on experiences in the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake, Dr. Asari and her colleagues published a Manual of Disaster Waste Management in 2012. Dr. Asari, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you very much. It's very big honor to be here. So I will start my presentation with screen sharing. Okay, so can I share the screen now? Okay, thank you very much. Again, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Mrs. Asari at Kyoto University. And at the same time, I'm a board member of Japanese Society of Waste Management and Material Cycle. So this year is 10 years anniversary after Great East Japan earthquake. So I want to wrap up our progress and also the Great East Japan earthquake. So some of you remember that the March 11, 2011, we have the very big earthquake, but not only earthquake, the very, very big tsunami, as you can see on the photo. So yeah, this is the photo of several places. Maybe if you know Japan well, you know the city Sendai or Ishinomaki in Miyagi Prefecture or Iwate Prefecture or Fukushima Prefecture. So the situation is quite different from cities or places. But anyway, we feel very, very big power of the nature, especially because of tsunami. So as already mentioned, but at first I want to show one example of our roles of academia. So as I mentioned, now I'm a board member of Japanese Society of Material Cycles and Waste Management. This society includes more than 1,000 the researchers on this field and also the experts from private sectors or the municipalities. But 2 days after the tsunami, some young researcher of our society pushing the committee to set up a kind of a special task team to deal with this issue. And 1 week later, the task team on disaster waste management and reconstruction was established. So more than 150 members was joining on that the team. And our main mission at the emergency phase is establishment of a platform for information sharing because we have several earthquakes or flood, but the tsunami is the first case for us. So we need the new information or new knowledge about the tsunami. And also the networking of different stakeholders for management is very important. And documentation. So in this case, we will show, I will show the one example, but we developed a kind of Japanese guideline. So there are already have several guidelines in Japan or the globally, but we need more information about tsunami, and also I think the amount and the quality of disaster waste is very, very huge compared to another previous disasters. So I, by myself, was going to the affected area. So 2 weeks later, I was in the disaster affected area in Sendai or in other cities. So you can see that this photo is near to the sea, but there used to be a kind of housing area, but there's no house, only tsunami sediments and affected trees were there. And we set up the kind of headquarters in the office of local governments to support the affected municipalities. Then, so as you can see in the photo, so the first version of the guideline for disaster waste management was published 3 weeks later of the tsunami in the Word file, very handmade style. But 1 year later, we can publish one a kind of a book, hard copy book, called Disaster Waste Management Strategy and the Separation Manual. So I think the flow is different from each country or city, but now this is very the four very normal flow of disaster waste in Japan. So here you can start the disaster waste management. So the waste from a disaster area or houses, but separation must be started at the beginning. It's much better. And then we have the temporary storage site that sometimes we set up two kinds. So this temporary storage site is quite near to the city or affected area, means housing area. But next, primary waste storage site, or sometimes we set up secondary waste storage sites. So these sites needs more large space. So sometimes this space is a little far from the central part of the city. But anyway, we set up a kind of storage site at the several places. And then, of course, the separation is quite important from the beginning or step by step. And I will show you the photo later, but even for disaster waste, you know, Japan is very famous for incineration for waste. So sometimes we build up the temporary incinerator. And also we have several steps for separation, classing, and then we did all efforts to reduce the amount of final disposal, meaning landfill amount. So anyway, there are several important points. For example, sometimes we have to storage the disaster waste for a long time, 1 year or 2 years. So the fires from long-term storage is very dangerous. So we develop a kind of special technique to monitor the temperature or the fires. Or of course, that we have to put in mind about the lack of final disposal site every time because Japan is very small. So intermediate treatment is also very important. So I will show you several the efforts or example. So for example, that this is how to separate from the beginning from each household. So this shows the temporary storage site, first temporary storage site. So we make a kind of drive-through system to collect disaster waste from each household. So they can come with their disaster waste, but they can put metals at the first point, next for vulnerable waste, next for the kind of hazardous waste like that. And also, some municipalities hired the damaged people for selecting or separation of the disaster waste. Yeah, so, and also you can see the temporary incineration plant like this. And also not only thinking about the amount, but also the quality of the waste is very important. So we don't call this as waste, but anyway, there are some photos or important things, each memorial things in the disaster affected area. So many volunteers did the big effort to clean up these kind of things. Yep. Anyway, disaster waste management needed 3 years for Great East Japan earthquake. So we don't have a clear definition or clear limitation of the time, but historically, we have to finalize our treatment for disaster waste in 3 years. So in this case as well. So briefly, quickly, I want to the report about our recycling for Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. So here shows the components of disaster waste. So as you can see, concrete is the major parts because the disaster waste includes so many houses. Yeah, but also you can see combustible or incombustible. Incombustible, yeah, sometimes includes the soils, yeah, or others. And here is the metals, yeah. And then but finally, we can achieve more than 70, around 70% of recycling rates. So after Great East Japan earthquake, I think very big improvements in this field, in disaster waste management field. Yeah, but there are several backgrounds because we have to prepare for more bigger earthquake or a kind of a tsunami. And also almost every year, I think because of the climate change, we have to face the small or large scale floods every year, typhoon, etc. So the biggest change is that we changed two laws, two regulations. One is related to the waste law, yeah, waste disposal law, and another one is basic disaster law. So we changed both law, and then we decided to local governments or national governments to set up the disaster waste management plan before the disaster. So already maybe 3 years has passed, and now more than half of local governments, means cities, towns, or prefectures, already have disaster waste management plan before the disaster. So I think that is the biggest change after the disaster. Okay, so I think we don't have enough time, and also many efforts and trials at each stakeholders. So I'm now at academia, or I can have several times for education. So this photo shows a kind of training for the high school students about disaster waste management, because at the disaster time, volunteer has very big role for to support separation of the disaster waste at the affected houses. Yep, and also I think yeah, it's just in the process, but we have to tackle as Team Japan. So as you can see, this is the flow as I already shown, but not only municipalities, but also volunteers or non-affected municipalities or private companies, prefectures, or a disaster waste network. So I'm in this network as well, but many experts or many stakeholders can contribute to whole disaster waste management. So yeah, so every year, unfortunately, every year we have the disaster, but it must be a very good chance to develop ourselves. Okay, and also, yeah, not only in Japan, we developed the especially Asian and the Pacific network on disaster waste management. So you can find international guidelines. Also in Thailand, maybe we have the same guideline in Thai. Yeah, and also, yeah, you can find the training materials and the movies on disaster waste management training. So I'm happy if you can visit there and join our team as the big global network for disaster waste management. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asari, for describing the work of the Japan Society of Material Cycles and Waste Management, specifically on actively leading the knowledge building and best practices sharing on disaster waste management, and also sharing the learnings after the Great East Japan earthquake. Now we shall hear from Dr. Sumitra Amatya, who will share the lessons from the 2015 Gorka earthquake. Dr. Amatya received her PhD in architecture from the Moscow Institute of Architecture in Russia. Dr. Amatya is considered the garbage management queen of Nepal because of her key role in developing national and local level policies, strategies, and action plans for integrated waste management and disaster waste management. Dr. Amatya is a professor at the Institute of Crisis Management Studies, which is affiliated with Tribhuvan University. Let us welcome Dr. Amatya.
Thank you so much. It's my privilege to be the part of this event. So basically, in today's webinar, I will be focusing the disaster waste generated from the earthquake from 2015 in Nepal. So let me share my sharing just a few seconds. Okay, I will start. So the disaster, as we all know, the disaster can generate huge amount of the waste at the time, and it's really difficult. The waste management is not just a simple. So let me start now officially. Thank you so much again. Disaster management in the Nepal, what we learned from the disaster management in Nepal. So I will be presenting on this slide. Why it doesn't move? It's not moving.
Dr. Sumitra, on the left
Yeah.
side, you can see the page number 01, and then you just push the arrow down. Next page. Okay. It's moving now. Thank you.
All the time we should do like that, yeah? Okay. So we know where Nepal located and why we Nepal we say one of the very risky zone in the world. It falls on the top 20 list of the most multi-hazard zone vulnerable countries in the world. In the terms of the climate, it falls on the 4th rank, and in the terms of the earthquake, in 11th rank, and as a prone of the flood, 13th rank in the world. So it's all happening because of its topography. If we see the topography of the Nepal, 86% of the total area of the Nepal covered by the mountains and the hills, and just the 14% flat land with about 30 million population in the Nepal, and average population growth rate is about 1.4 percentage. And the GDP, gross domestic product, if we if we see on that, so the total urban area where most of the people live, and it's more risky area, so that they contribute about the 33.1 percentage in the GDP, and the Kathmandu Valley, along with the three district, contribute the 23.4% in the national GDP. So we see before we talk about the disaster waste, so we should have some glance of the waste management in the Nepal. So if we see the composition volume. We see every single day produce waste per person per day 370 to 500 gram per day. And if we see the institutional area, 4 kilogram per school, 1.4% per piece, and 1.4 kilo per shop. So Kathmandu Valley, in the Kathmandu Valley, if we see the properties of the waste, about 50 to 80% waste is degradable, wet waste, and the rest of the waste, plastic, paper, glass, textile, rubber, etc. The very in few percentage. In 2015 disaster, when earthquake happened in the Kathmandu Valley produced about huge amount of the waste. In fact, in normal days, Kathmandu Valley produced 1,000 tons per day, and more than 65% of the municipal waste generated organic type of the waste, and spent about the 10% of their total budget on the solid waste management only, and out of 10%, they spent 60 to 70% for the sweeping and collection by the local government, and the 20 to 30% they spent for the transport, and the rest of the budget goes to final disposal. So what kind of the policy and the act regulation available in the Nepal related to the waste? If we see that the Constitution of Nepal, which gives us to live healthy and clean environment, and the Solid Waste Management Act, Local Government Operation Act, Disaster Risk Reduction Management Act, Post-Disaster Recovery Framework, and Disaster Waste Management Policy Strategy, which is supposed to have approved by the Nepal government. So disaster, if we talk about the disaster, particularly in the case of the Nepal, multiple hazards such as earthquake, flood, landslide, fires, lightning, windstorm, all this happening, or now new one is COVID happening in the Nepal. In the 2015, Nepal faced 7.8 Richter scale of the earthquake, and about 9,000 people they lost their life, and 30,000 people injured, and about the 0.9 million buildings being collapsed partially or fully. So the approximately 10 million ton of the waste generated from the 14 most affected districts, and out of this 14 district, 3 districts located in the Kathmandu Valley. From the Kathmandu Valley only, waste 4 million ton of the waste being produced during these 2 days, in the few 2 days. And during this earthquake period, many people lived in open area in the tent, and we found PDNA, according to PDNA report 2015. So the plastic waste being massively increased. About the 12% of the plastic waste, just in the one-time use of the plastic cup, plastic bag, packaging goods that been produced. And so what we learned from this earthquake, so we learned is mainstreaming disaster waste issue within the disaster preparedness and response plan and action. So the most of the focus has been going on the disaster preparedness and response plan. But when we started, we lobbied, we tried to mainstream waste management issue within the disaster preparedness response and rescue action plan. So what we found during this process, so some achievement definitely, we see from the response to preparedness, we started to learn we should be proactive rather than reactive. And the disaster waste management policy, strategy, and action plan being drafted with the technical assistance of the UNEP. And given in the national 15th 5th year 15 national plan of Nepal government has given the priority for the disaster waste. That's a very good achievement in my knowledge. And a disaster management contingency plan into the national holistic waste management plan has been, included. And some challenges definitely we faced huge challenges during this period. But some of the, if we, put in the order some of the challenges, so the coordination between the government and the other stakeholders, there is a very huge gap between the coordination from the government and the other stakeholders. So integrate disaster waste management strategy and action plan in the national SDG process. So the SDG in the SDG process, we facing a huge challenge to include this disaster waste management strategy. Still it's hard. It's still to be implemented in the field. It's still to be fielded. So in the case of the donor, if we say the donor has given more priority for the reconstruction, but they don't give the priority on the disaster waste. So the lack of the clear roles and responsibility of the stakeholders in terms of disaster waste, lack of innovative technology, inadequate land use master plan, so if we had before land use plan, so that we can reduce the disaster risk as a waste generation, as well as to facilitate the subsequent management. That's also been, we face as one of the bigger challenges. And the disaster waste plan as a part of the city and national level waste management and other development strategy. So basically, we found achievement as a pilot project on disaster waste management in the Kathmandu, in the Lalitpur city. So that pilot project is still running, and many people, earning money from this pilot project. And the people started to, rethink about the disaster waste. So disaster waste is not waste until and unless you don't misuse or misplace it. That people started to know that also the one of the achievements. So the post-disaster recovery framework 2016 to 2020 prepared during this period, and that's also the one of the big achievements. And the importance of the 3R strategy in the disaster risk management and job creation, that's also been the, now that this is like a, reduce, reuse, recycle in the disaster waste management. Before, disaster means just throw somewhere, that's it. And the people do not like to segregate only in the village area where the mud construction, they segregate the stone and the brick, mud, they reuse. In the case of the Kathmandu, that's not been seen. But after that, so after strong, campaigning, after all this, the importance of the 3R strategy, the people started to know, and the government sector also realized that's one thing. That's also one of the achievements. And the challenges, so again here also we faced a lot of challenges. It's like no clear line of the sight between the legislation, the policy, and plan in the related disasters. There are many legislation, but none of the legislation policy has clearly incited about the disaster waste management. That's one of the biggest challenges. I faced our team faced when I was executive director of the service government. One of the government sector, so we face a bigger problem on that. So no disaster waste management expert with a technical skill in the systematical demolition of the building. The people started to demolish the building haphazardly. So there are a lot of risky waste like electronic waste, biomedical waste being mixed, and the people were not aware about this. It's a hazard, it's a risk, and that also the more one of the problem. And proper master plan on the debris waste management. That's been before 2015. There was no master plan on demolished building. Are the serious obstacle to reconstruction because space like location where to dump all this debris, all this disaster waste. So due to this, it took a long time to reconstruction work. So 3R practices uncoordinated and weak in the application. Lack of the adequate financial and technical resource as everywhere we also faced, and encouragement of the public-private partnership also been pressed, seriously for the demolition and recycle of the debris. So these are most of the one of the wonderful things in the after this something is always there is positive and negative parts of any event. So what we learned from the this earthquake 2015 is many of the awareness awareness program has been raised by the donor NGO that demolition for the demolition work and debris management. But many job has been created on the reconstruction work on the affected area, and we started to know about knowledge has to be exchanged. So learning is a never-ending process, continuous learning process, and the continual improvement is most we learn. This is one of the biggest achievement what we learn from and challenges, basic challenges when we think about the debris management in a recovery policy. So there factors the cost of the personal protective equipment because it cost high. So the people started to by hand very they segregate, they reuse. That's also a big challenge because they cannot use because of the cost. They cannot use this equipment kind of equipment and the technical all been demolished manually. Mechanical demolition has been rarely used. Training of the supervisor also was one of the challenge. If you see the problem, the hanging robots we didn't have high reach excavator to demolish all these things, and most donors who have funded the reconstruction, but they don't have budget for the demolition. So because of that, so the reconstruction process took too long time. Just after 6 years of the earthquake, one of the tallest tower of the Nepal just been inaugurated by our Honorable Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli. So this is because of the technical problems, clearly human resources and financial system, all these things. And between this 2015 to the 2020, there have been, published many disaster waste related report publications like a National Integrated Waste Management Strategy and Action Plan 2020 to 2035, where include the disaster waste. That's a good part of all this lesson learned, I think. And similarly, waste management policy strategy in the Nepal, you see, and baseline study had been done basing on this earthquake 2015. We have some kind of data in hand now, and disaster waste management manual has been prepared, and the disaster waste management guideline also been prepared with the support of the Kyoto University Professor Asarisa, and also been one of the initiator of translating all these Asia Pacific guidelines into the Nepali language. That's a good part of these things, I see. So what in the conclusion? So what I can say is, disaster can generate huge amount of the waste. We all know that. This waste can, poses a serious threat to the public health and the environment and the natural resources. So what we should do is, adaptation of the disaster waste management policy. The Policy Act is one thing. If we don't apply this Policy Act in the field, that policy guideline may not have any strong meaning. So the implementation is the must. Second is increase the institutional technical capacity on the handling of the disaster waste management. We should have promote green and sustainable reconstruction technology using disaster waste management, considering the environment, and promote the private sector and the public-private partnership model on the disaster waste for the natural resource preservation, conservation, and the government should emphasize on the empowering community and mobilizing them in the utilizing disaster waste. And the 3R principle should be applied on the disaster waste management as well. So we should link all these things with the income generation and the livelihood. And the next step is sensitization of the disaster waste issues to gather support from the government and all level stakeholders. So we should aware to the people reducing the potential amount of the waste generation in the country and its likely impact and the risk. So the people may not know about its risk. So mixed waste can create, very hazard to the liquid waste, solid waste, and gaseous waste. So the people should know about. Government should have immediately adopt all rules and regulations and put on the place all this policy regulation and strong mechanism. We should have the Nepal government should have prepared disaster waste generation outlook for the Nepal, linking with the natural resource management as well. So the strong mechanism of the monitoring and evaluation and the implementation of the disaster waste management strategy and its specified indicators should be on the place. And the basic thing is coordination, cooperation, and partnership. These three things should be like in the recycle, reduce, and reuse, because it's alone. Disaster is not only the own country's issues; it's all issues, and we have only one world, and we have to save our world. In that case, we have to have willingness to work in the crazy hour during our disaster period, and we have to be able to work in the stressful environment what we learned from 2015 earthquake, and we need the diplomacy and the coordination with different level of the stakeholder, like from the government, people, individual citizens, and the local government, provincial government, central government, regional level countries, and this is a global issue as well. So we have to save our planet. We have to save our natural resources, and we have to minimize. We cannot stop disaster, but we can minimize the losses from the disaster. And this disaster waste generated from the disaster, we can reuse, we can recycle, and we can reduce smartly if we work together, and we will have willpower, and we will think it's my place, my art, and my responsibility. If we think like that, definitely we can manage disaster waste smartly and intelligently. I think I've been in the time. I finished. So if I think any questions, definitely I will be here. So thank you so much again. It's been really nice to be the part of your webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amatya. Thank you for highlighting the importance of policy and institutional support for disaster waste management, and also stressing that we need capacity building and partnerships to do disaster waste management work. Again, as a reminder, if you have questions for Dr. Asardi and Dr. Amatya, please free to type them in the Q&A box anytime, and we will tend to them during the Q&A session. Our third speaker comes from Lautoka, Fiji, which, like the Philippines, also has to deal with tropical cyclones during the pandemic. Mr. Shaland Singh has served as the Senior Health Inspector of the Lautoka City Council since 2000. Mr. Singh is the Chair of the Pacific Regional Disaster Waste Management Technical Working Group and is a co-author of the Practical Guide to Solid Waste Management in Pacific Island Countries and Territories. These days, Mr. Singh has been very busy as a frontliner in the fight against COVID-19 in Lautoka City. Mr. Singh, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I have much pleasure in sharing the experiences of Fiji in terms of coping with the double crisis from a waste management perspective. That was the case of COVID-19 and TC Herald cases in Lautoka, Fiji. Background of my presentation, I'll be briefly highlighting on the COVID-19 situation in Lautoka, Fiji, challenges in dealing with waste management during the COVID-19 and tropical cyclone Harold, and the council's strategies during COVID-19 and post-TC Harold. And of course, I'll be sharing with us the lessons from the COVID-19 and TC Harold. In terms of COVID-19, as we all know, across the globe, the COVID-19 has caused unprecedented negative impacts on mankind globally, and Pacific Islands is no exception. It has caused negative impacts on our economy, unemployment, our lifestyles, our health. It has put constraints on our food security, social issues like crimes, violence, education, poverty, and of course, it has greatly impacted waste management. Fiji recorded its first COVID-19 case on March 19, 2020, which happened to be from my city, Lautoka. And Fiji went on to record a total of 109 positive cases from March 19 to April this year. And during this period, Lautoka City recorded a total of 6 cases, and which were all linked to the first case last year. However, I'm proud to say that there was no community transmission for record 365 days from April 9th last year till April 18 just this month. So currently, Fiji has 42 active cases, which is 28 community cases and 14 border quarantine cases. Fiji government undertook immediate proactive responses. For example, lockdown of Lautoka, followed by Suva and other high-risk areas. Schools were closed down. Even now, the schools are closed down. Businesses has to be closed down, except for essential services like supermarkets and restaurants were open. The government of Fiji introduced curfews from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. and later it was moved to 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. And in the history of Fiji, we have had curfew in the night for record more than a year now. State of disaster was declared by the NDMO, National Disaster Management Office. And the government activated emergency operation centers and divisional task force teams. And we had to amend our Public Health Act in terms of introducing preventive measures, protocols, and also increasing the fines for COVID-related offenses. And the government also introduced a special COVID-19 response budget to cater for lockdowns, quarantines, isolations, and all other expenses to meet the cost of COVID-19. Whilst we were having the COVID-19, Fiji was struck by a tropical cyclone Harold on April 7th last year, which caused widespread destruction, claiming 1 life and injuring 26 people, with estimated damages in excess of Fijian $28.4 million. Some challenges of waste management during the COVID-19 and TC Herald. Yes, because Lautoka was under lockdown and landfill for Nendi and Lautoka is in Lautoka. So Nendi could not bring the waste to Lautoka. They had to take the waste to Singotaka, which was very costly and time consuming. Just because we had lockdowns, we could not travel from one town to another. So there was unavailability of spare parts for waste management plants and machinery. There was unavailability of PPEs for solid waste management frontline workers. And most importantly, we found a reduction in commercial industrial waste generation and disposal amounts. For example, disposal amount in April 2020 was 1,696 tons compared to 4,762 tons in April previous year. So the waste decreased significantly. And we all assumed and presumed that there was perceived risk to frontline solid waste management workers who were exposed to collecting garbage in the streets because they were exposed to the public. So this because the first time that the COVID-19 happened in Fiji, there was a case of COVID-19 in Fiji, our workers were scared to go in the public. There was, of course, because of the less waste and other activities, there was a reduction in solid waste management revenue. For example, the tipping fee and the city rates, because people were also facing difficulty in terms of unemployment, so they could not pay city rates, which affected the operations of the councils. There was a challenge of managing increased disaster waste because of the TC Herald during the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, during the COVID-19, there are a lot of medical waste being generated, like hand gloves, face masks, and other things. So all this greatly impacted the way we manage our waste. Interestingly, because in terms of COVID-19, we did not have any fatality, but there were risks, communicable disease, lepto, typhoid, dengue, and diarrhea from the TC Herald, whereby we had 33 dengue cases, 1 death from dengue, and 4 lepto and 1 typhoid case from Lautoka City. These are some of the pictures we can see because of the TC Herald, the islands which were badly affected, in coastal areas. You can see storm surges, houses were badly damaged in case of Fiji. Our strategies in terms of handling the waste during both the TC Herald and COVID-19, the council, Lautoka City Council, played a pivotal role by working with all the stakeholders in ensuring that citizens of Lautoka City were secure from risk of COVID-19 transmissions, as well as post-TC Herald impacts on environmental health, especially lepto, typhoid, dengue, and other public health impacts. It was utmost priority of the council to provide uninterrupted solid waste management services throughout the term of both COVID-19 and TC Herald mitigation and response efforts. Cleaning and sanitizing of public facilities was a crucial step taken by council. This also included mass awareness to essential businesses, as well as house-to-house mobile fever clinics, reaching out to 58,000 population in 5 days within Lautoka City. So this was a big achievement for the council to rule out any other possible cases of COVID-19 or LTDs within the communities. LCC, the council cleared and safely disposed and managed 2,227 loads and which amounted to 2,260 tons of disaster waste from April 8 to May 29th last year. And we also had to condemn some of the food items which was unfit for consumption. The council is a custodian of all the citizens of Lautoka City actively represented at the district COVID-19, TC Herald, and lepto, typhoid, dengue task force team. As you know, there were 3 things happening at the same time, 3 crises. One was COVID-19, TC Herald, and outbreak of communicable diseases. So our Commissioner Western decided that we should have one task force, and we address and discuss all the things in the same task force, and we go and act upon it. So our council was actively participating in the task force, and we helped in setting up the quarantine centers, cleaning of hospitals, conducting mobile fever clinics, and mass awareness in the communities. The council also carried out LTDD, which is lepto, typhoid, and dengue disease investigations, awareness, cleanup campaigns, perifocal spraying, etc., to minimize the disease from spreading due to TC Herald's impacts. Rural areas were also assisted in terms of free disposal of cleanup waste at our council's dump. And we conducted awareness for our frontline waste management workers, which was very paramount in terms of hygiene, safety, hygiene and safety, as well as physical distancing. All waste, in the case of Lautoka, was from the quarantine and isolation centers was safely handled by Ministry of Health, separate from the normal garbage and incinerated at the hospital's facility. These are some of the pictures to show the activities of the council, the task force teams of the COVID-19, TC Herald, and the LTDD. This is our Commissioner Western handling the task force teams meeting, the awareness in terms of physical distancing in the urban areas, hand sanitizers, awareness for our waste management workers, and other activities as was conducted by the council. These were cleanup campaigns, larval surveys, and perifocal spraying, and in terms of distribution of supplies given to us by the donor agencies like UNICEF, WHO, and other agencies. As you can see, the visitations was done to supermarkets for condemnation of the food, and you can see the assistance being given to the communities and cleanup campaigns by the community working with the council and other agencies. Lessons, some of the lessons that we could like to share in terms of COVID-19 and TCRL. Yes, frontline workers and for that matter, public also face unprecedented social, health, and psychological challenges. As you know, now Fiji is also under most of the cities like Suva, Lami, Nassori, Nandi, and Lautoka are under lockdown because of COVID. So this has placed a lot of social, health, and psychological challenges for the workers and also the public. Last year, barter trade that was very popular for the Fijians who opt for cashless trade. So, for example, I gave fish, and other people would give me the supplies like flour or biscuits, I think. So it was very popular in terms of during the COVID-19. We noted that there is more risk of COVID-19 transmission from social distancing and poor personal hygiene practices than handling waste, as we experience also around the globe. During COVID-19, we can see this increased generation of waste due to the pandemic in terms of the face mask and gloves and gown. And now we're starting to see some of the face masks in public areas. So this is a concern, an issue for us in terms of disasters. And COVID itself is a disaster, as we can all agree. There's opportunity for recycling from disaster waste in terms of hurricanes, whereby we can recover metals and green waste. During COVID-19, we found that it was very common that just because people were on lockdown at home, spending time with family, backyard gardening and composting was very popular. Our council promoted a total of 19 compost bins during COVID-19 and sold 3.2 tons of market compost, which showed that people had interest in backyard gardening. And we can also conclude that waste management authorities can manage waste effectively under any circumstance, under any disasters, only if we have established waste management workers, integrated solid waste management system up and running during normal situations. So if you have normal operation during normal situations, if there's any disaster, we can always address the issues and challenges. Due to proactive, united, and decisive action, there was zero COVID-19 community transmission case reported in Fiji for complete 1 year. The cases that are reported were all imported border quarantine cases who were in quarantine. However, this year, on April 19, due to slightest breach of protocol at quarantine facility, resulted in another community case on April 19. And now we have a total of 42 cases in Fiji, out of which 28 are community cases. And now we are revamping our activities to ensure that we prevent further transmissions to the community, because it will greatly impact our waste management, it will greatly impact the society and the population of Fiji as a whole in terms of economy, tourism, and other activities. So thank you. I hope you would have enjoyed the lessons that we've shared in terms of COVID-19 and tropical cyclone Harold, the case of Lautoka City in Fiji. As you can see this myself in the picture, doing awareness to the communities during the COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, and we're sorry to hear about the recent surge of cases in Fiji. Thank you for sharing the strategies of the Lautoka City Council in dealing with waste management after tropical cyclone Harold and during the pandemic. It was good that you highlighted that waste can be effectively managed under any disaster only when systems have been established and are working well during normal times.
Thank you.
Now for our last speaker, who will share how Makati City is managing its waste in this time of pandemic. We have Ms. Liza Ramos, who is the Research and Planning Division Head of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office of Makati City. Ms. Ramos is a licensed environmental planner with a master's degree in disaster risk and crisis management at the Asian Institute of Management. She has devoted more than 10 years of her professional career in disaster risk reduction and management in the city government of Makati. She is instrumental in sustaining Makati's engagement with CityNet Disaster Cluster and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. She is a UNDRR Global Education Training Institute trainer for the Making Cities Resilient campaign and is currently the Vice President for Metro Manila of U-Inspire Philippines, a platform for the youth and young professionals in science, engineering, technology, and innovation for disaster risk reduction in the country. Ms. Ramos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lenny, and I hope everyone can hear me. So while the Secretariat is working on my slide because I think it has a different orientation from our view now. There you go. I think it's being fixed now. So good day to everyone. It's always difficult not to be the last presenter coming from a roster of speakers who have the expertise in discussing our subject matter for today. I must admit that I am no expert in disaster waste management. But today, let me be the voice of the local government officials and personnel from Makati City, who are the city's environmental frontliners, making sure that our ecosystem is not disrupted despite the challenges brought about by various disasters. I'm pretty sure most of them are with us today. I can see some of their names in the participants list. And I believe they're actively listening to make sure that I discuss their hard work with justice. Anyway, I will be presenting a timely topic based on the local experience. Basically, we're with my colleague here in Lautoka, we have a similar topic to discuss with you. But of course, what I will be presenting to you is how Makati City managed its waste at the time of COVID-19. Next slide, please. Let me start by introducing to you Makati City. Makati is just a small city in the metropolitan Manila. We only have a land area of 27.36 square kilometers, covering only 4% of Metro Manila. The city is subdivided into 33 barangays, and barangays, as we know, is almost equivalent to communities or wards or villages. Based on geographical and socioeconomic profile, these barangays were strategically clustered for planning and, of course, developmental intervention purposes. And you can see on the slide which barangays are clustered together as represented by their respective colors. Makati is the country's business and financial center. At the heart of the city, basically on the green-colored part of the map, that is where our commercial business district lies. This is where major businesses, malls, main offices of various companies, even embassies and consulates are housed. This is also why the population of Makati, from having a 600,000 local or nighttime data, it reaches 4 to about 5 million during daytime. Yes, Makati City is a highly urbanized city where rapid urbanization is both a strength and a weakness. Strength because of the financial return it provides, for one. Reason why Makati is tagged as the richest city in the country. Weakness because of the challenges urbanization brings. And waste management is just one. Next slide, please. On the next slide, particularly with the overlaid multi-hazard map, we can see that Makati is exposed to natural hazards. For one, there is a fault system that transects on the east side of Makati for about 2.85 kilometers, with 4 barangays exposed to ground rupture, especially for the areas with soft soil. We may experience an intensity 8 ground shaking from a 7.2 magnitude worst-case scenario of earthquake. And we can also expect 25 out of our 33 barangays to be affected by liquefaction. In a worst-case scenario of a 200-year return flood cycle period, it is projected that Makati's perimeter areas will be inundated at a depth of around 3 meters, with estimated 90,000 affected individuals. And whether induced by earthquake or by rains, there is a small area in Makati, also on the east side, that is also prone to landslides where 5 barangays are exposed to. So even if Makati is one of the highly urbanized cities in the country, and the richest one for that matter, it is not spared from the threats of natural hazards. And perhaps to help you imagine further, on this map that you can see on the slide, the areas with overlaid hazards, mostly those in perimeter, are the barangays with the largest population, and unfortunately, part of the not so wealthy group of barangays in Makati. So imagine what would happen in this area when an earthquake strikes. Or if we are really unfortunate, if it's toppled by a strong typhoon at this time that we are still at war with COVID-19. Aside from the impacts in human life and properties, how would we manage our wastes? I may not have a ready answer for now, but I do know that our office, along with the other offices and partners of the city government of Makati, we all try our best to become ready for the worst. We invest in human resources, in physical assets, and even in community empowerment. And this is what I would like to share with you today. Next slide, please. Disaster waste management, if I may say, is a neglected sector here in the Philippines, at least in terms of national or regional guidelines. There has been no clear direction or guidance as to how we can manage the different types of wastes for different types of disasters. Yet, in Makati, we were able to somehow guide our own way in ensuring that disaster waste management is not left behind, at least in our disaster plans. Of course, we were able to do this with help from various partners here and abroad. And let me run you through the various disaster plans that we have and how disaster waste management has been aligned. Of course, let's start off with the mother plan for disaster risk reduction and management, the Makati DRRM Plan 2019 to 2030. We specifically identified an outcome for proper waste management pre and post disasters. In fact, we also identified specific strategies to achieve this. And let me share with you some of these strategies. First is, of course, by integrating risk assessments and estimated volume of wastes, pre and post disasters in our existing or new waste management policies and plans. We also are looking at enhancing our waste management, including monitoring capabilities, both for our human and physical resources. We also would like to strengthen the promotion of our proper waste management to cover all our stakeholders. And last but not the least, understanding that we live in an ecosystem, we also would like to strengthen our transboundary agreements for waste and debris reduction and management prior and after a disaster, of course, with the help of some partners for resource augmentation. As early as 2013, with the technical assistance from the International Recovery Platform, Makati was able to develop our pre-disaster recovery plan. And here, with environment as one of the key sectors we identified that we need to focus on for immediate recovery, we also have identified policies and strategies on ensuring immediate debris clearing, segregation, and disposal. Similar to the pre-disaster recovery plan, our contingency plans for earthquake and hydromet hazards have identified a cluster or a sector that will focus on waste management. Of course, the city's 10-year solid waste management plan, 2014 to 2023, specifically identified the strategy or sets of strategies for managing special wastes like disaster wastes. And lastly, our COVID-19 recovery plan also identifies environment as one of the key sectors where we identified waste management and sanitation through multi-step waste management process as a priority. So you see, Makati tries its best to make sure that we cover all our bases for disaster risk reduction and management, regardless if we have guidance or very minimal or a full guidance from the national or the regional government, because at the end of the day, local governments are still the front lines or frontliners when it comes to disaster risk reduction and management. Next slide, please. And earlier, Glenn and Lenny mentioned about the post-disaster waste management project, and they mentioned that Makati is a project beneficiary. So, as a project beneficiary, along with my co-speaker today, Lautoka, Fiji, Makati actively participated in the post-disaster waste management project. We launched this project in Makati last year, around January. It was followed by a training of trainers held in Ateneo de Manila University and the workshop for the technical working group of Makati, where learnings from the TOT were applied in drafting some parts of the DWM contingency plan for typhoon. But then again, COVID happened and project activities have to be put on hold. However, for Makati, we grabbed the opportunity to also apply some learnings from the training and workshops that we were able to participate related to this project. While the project focuses on typhoon, we were able to apply the principles of our COVID-19 waste management practices, as you will see on the next part of my presentation. And of course, as we were able to adapt to the new normal, even in conducting trainings like this or workshops and webinars like this, we recently concluded the second batch of training for the PDWM project team of Makati. So much for my introduction. Let us now go to the COVID-19 situation of Makati. Next slide, please. There you go. What you see on the slide is a snapshot of our COVID-19 tracker dashboard as of April 26. Like in the whole of Metro Manila, trend is also increasing in Makati, unfortunately. We have more than 1,000 active cases, and perhaps it's still counting at this time. So 1 year after the height of the COVID-19 scare in the country, we are still battling against it. As we continue to increase our efforts in managing our COVID cases, the need for supplies and materials like PPEs and other medical supplies also increases. This is not to mention that we are also now very aggressive in rolling out our COVID-19 vaccination program. So compared with last year, perhaps we can say that the wastes that we accumulate for this fight against COVID-19 also doubled in quantity for this year. Next slide, please. So specifically for the COVID-19 pandemic, the Department of Health, acknowledging that healthcare wastes, if unmanaged, may aggravate the health condition of the population, released some memoranda providing guidelines on management of healthcare wastes. On the left side, the circular is about formulating waste management plan for all the facilities used during COVID-19 operations, the strict enforcement of PPE use during all stages of disaster waste management, and of course, to guidelines for following standards on collection, storage, and transport. On the right side, the guidelines actually just supplements the previously the first guidelines that I mentioned, but this one focuses on vaccination generated waste. So following the principles of safe waste management of infectious wastes, this circular emphasizes that we should strictly follow proper waste segregation within the vaccination site, including proper labeling, quality plastics with minimum thickness, among others. And it mentions specific standards on collection, storage, and transport that should also be followed. And being national policies, Makati used these circulars to develop our local guidelines on DWM for COVID-19 operations. Next slide, please. But even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm proud to let you all know that Makati already have or developed and enacted through city ordinance. It's Makati Environmental Health and Sanitation Code. And here are some of the code's highlights. It enforces segregation at source, both at the household and business levels. It bans garbage burning. It also encourages owners of vacant lots to fence their lots to prevent it in being used as a dumping area. And it even provides guidelines for public transportation operators to ensure availability of trash bins inside the vehicles. So do note that the Department of Health circular that I discussed earlier, so for COVID waste management and vaccination, was developed 1 month after the COVID-19 outbreak in the country. And for Makati, this local health and sanitation code has actually become a useful reference for us during the early stages of COVID-19 management and in the development of the Makati guidelines in COVID-19 waste management, which was actually formulated earlier than the DOH circular. So it's around February of last year. It basically provides guidelines on waste management for hazardous wastes, which I will discuss in a little while. Next slide, please. We are also aggressive in disseminating information, of course, through our information, education, and communication campaigns, both at the city and community levels. So aside from actively posting through the Facebook page of Makati, My Makati, our Department of Environmental Services closely coordinates with the barangay officials for information dissemination, since we know that they are relatively influential at the community level to disseminate guidelines on safe waste management. Webinars are likewise being conducted, and just recently, a webinar on safe water management was held. Next slide, please. Our waste management guidelines require segregation at source. In the guidelines, we classify wastes into hazardous and non-hazardous wastes with corresponding color coding for the trash bags. So we have black for the non-hazardous wastes. That includes recyclables and food wastes, among others, and yellow for the hazardous wastes or wastes which are considered infectious, such as PPEs and other medical wastes. Next slide, please. On collection, we make sure that our medical waste collectors wear complete and full PPE, and yellow bags are properly disinfected and contained in garbage bins with hazardous stickers before collection. Hazardous and non-hazardous wastes are in separate bins. The city outsourced waste collectors are the only authorized waste collection team, along, of course, with the Task Force COVID-19 sanitation team of the city that go around the different barangays with a regular schedule in collecting these wastes. Next slide, please. In transporting wastes collected are stored in enclosed bins with lids and locks to prevent waste particles from the surrounding environment and air. The personnel must likewise ensure that the plastic bag is properly tied inside the bin. So from the barangays, this will be transported to the incident command post at City Hall Quadrangle, where a dedicated storage has been built. On storage, we make sure that medical wastes are stored in an enclosed facility. Our sanitation team constructed what we call as White House that serves as storage of hazardous wastes from all health facilities and quarantine facilities. Next slide, please. We also ensure daily disinfection of this storage area. Non-hazardous wastes like food and non-food wastes collected from each room of the quarantine facilities is separated prior to disinfection 3 days before being converted into residual waste and disposed of at proper segregated storage facility. Domestic waste in black bags are stored outside of the storage facility for proper segregation and disposal. And sharps and needles are properly stored in a labeled container and are being weighed before disposal. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned earlier, we have an outsourced provider for special and hazardous waste. And these wastes are regularly collected. It's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And sometimes there are additional days and times as needed and required by the city government. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see a visual representation of the waste management process that our service provider strictly follows. It will all start with a collection at the location we identified, following safety measures as I shared earlier. It will transport the collected waste to our storage area located in the COVID-19 Incident Command Post compound in City Hall. After performing some processes in the storage areas I've discussed, it will transport waste to a treatment storage disposal facility for proper treatment. And upon treatment, the treated infectious wastes will then be transported to the accredited landfill. We are just pleased to let you know that our service provider is accredited by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and in fact, ISO certified. And as we know, ISO certification ensures efficient and effective processes. Hence, it's safe to brag that this process flow you can see on the slide strictly abides by safe waste management standards for infectious waste, thereby minimizing risks as well for the outsourced provider. Next slide, please. Part of our safe waste management practice is reporting and documentation. You can see on the slide a template that our sanitation team uses for identifying, waste components. A very simple type of waste characterization. Next slide, please. And because of this simple template, we were able to get these figures that you can see on the slide. From June to December last year, we recorded around 25 kilos of generated COVID-19 wastes. And for 2021, covering only the first 4 months of the year, we already have recorded around 15 kilos of COVID-19 wastes. A big factor in this huge leap is most likely, as I've said earlier, our vaccination rollout. Next slide, please. But of course, the city cannot do it alone. We also have a fair share of safe waste management and practices at the community level, as you can see on the slide. Our barangays like East Trembo and Magallanes have best practices that they were able to share during the webinar organized by the Department of Environmental Services, and we are expecting other barangays to follow suit. Good for us because I can see names of our barangay chairpersons and some barangay kagawads in our participants list in today's webinar. So I hope you can hear this. And but of course, if I may highlight, what's good with this initiative is really the empowerment of our barangay officials in taking the lead and complementing the efforts of the city in proper and safe waste management to avoid creating new risks. Next slide, please. Our story, like many other countries as presented by my co-speakers, is not an all-success type of story. We do have our challenges, as you can see in this slide. In my introduction, I mentioned that rapid urbanization of Makati has its strengths and weaknesses. And I believe you were able to get a sense of how it becomes a weakness as I presented the salient points of our practices. Secondly, Makati being a densely built-up city also has space constraints. Hence, building a makeshift White House within the vicinity of City Hall, though secured and far from people working and transacting in City Hall, this is very temporary in nature. It's very small. But, and as we know, for bigger types of disasters, a small White House might not be enough. Despite these good practices that I have shared, we admit that we still lack technical personnel who can really delve into disaster waste management. And again, if we talk about a worst case scenario, a massive impact of disaster, the number of technical personnel that we have right now might not be enough. Another one is the low household waste generation during the quarantine, especially because of the rise of food and item deliveries. So there's also increase in wastes from packaging. We still also feel the need to integrate disaster waste management for complex emergencies. As I said earlier, if multiple whammies strike Makati, we have to be ready. And lastly, specifically during this period of pandemic, there are still some personnel who need to be quarantined. And there was actually a time in our operations that manpower is really down. So we would really need a lot of people understanding the concept of safe waste management, and perhaps a number of volunteers to act as our surge capacity or to serve as our surge capacity. Next slide, please. But of course, we have some immediate solutions to some of these challenges. First is, of course, continuing with the PDWM project with my co-panelists here. You heard how rich the experiences and the expertise my co-panelists have here. No? So we hope to also maximize those expertise, and we intend to formulate our disaster waste management contingency plan within the year. Part of this contingency plan formulation and to address issues on space for temporary storage sites or TSS, we will conduct feasibility assessments, and hopefully we would be able to complete this study prior to any untoward eventuality. And lastly, we will continue capacity building on disaster waste management for the city and community stakeholders. This ends my presentation. Once again, I'd like to acknowledge the hardships that our environmental frontliners has been experiencing to make sure that COVID wastes are properly managed. Likewise, this presentation is made possible because of the technical inputs of the ever-reliable PDWM project team of Makati. Let me name them. Representatives from the Department of Environmental Services, I can see their names in the participants list. The Makati Health Department, and Liga ng mga Barangay. Special thanks as well to the DRRMO team, of course, my team, who worked relentlessly for putting together a good presentation to share the story of Makati and preparing for this event for all of us to learn from the DWM experiences and practices of the 4 countries. Again, thank you, and let's all stay safe and healthy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ramos, for walking us through the waste management strategies of Makati City during this time of pandemic. It is really quite remarkable to see that Makati City has integrated disaster waste management in many of its plans. Thank you so much for leading the work, and we look forward to the completion of the disaster waste management contingency plan of Makati City. So we have come to the end of our presentations, and we apologize for running behind the schedule. We have received a couple of questions, but we will just answer probably one question live. We would like to request the speakers to please keep their answers short so that we can just extend for a few more. So one question that we have here is on because many of you have highlighted the importance of early preparedness in terms of disaster waste management. So what can you say are some examples of incentives which can be used to encourage cities or municipalities to proactively prepare a disaster waste management plan? So maybe we can start with Dr. Asari, please. Thank you. Okay, I don't see Professor Asari, so maybe she dropped off. So maybe we can start with Dr. Amatya, please.
Can you repeat the question? Just I got a bit.
Yeah. So, what are examples, based on your experience? What are some examples of incentives that we can provide to our cities and municipalities to prepare proactively a disaster waste management plan?
Okay. Disaster waste management plan, we have somehow we prepared, and this has been disseminated in the different municipality level government. Basically, we encourage to the private sector to invest on the equipment or recycle all these things and make like a meteorological facility center. A disaster waste management plan, which has been introduced, but still very weak in the implementation stage as well. We are encouraging government of Nepal also focusing to incentivize providing the budgetary system for the waste management, and the disaster waste being the part of the integrated holistic waste management system, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Amatya. Mr. C, how do you advocate for the preparation of a disaster waste management plan under the umbrella of the Lautoka City Council?
Yes, thank you for that question. As you know, all the municipalities work in line with the government's policies and plans. So in order to prepare at a local level, just a waste management contingency plan, it is very crucial and indispensable that a national waste management guide is prepared for every country at a national level, which is reflected onto the national NDMO, National Disaster Management Office. So it can help us and guide the local municipal councils to prepare their own disaster waste management contingency plans. So if we have a guide at the national level, at a regional level, that it surely helps the local municipal councils to work and in line, be in terms with the national policies. And also we found that in the case of Lautoka City, it was very crucial that we have a teamwork, that the management have a task force, a committee on disaster waste management established, so everybody can contribute effectively, and we work with all the stakeholders like the waste contractors, the citizens, and public, the business houses, so that we can prepare a good waste management contingency plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Ms. Ramos?
I think there are a number of. I will give three reasons why local governments have to invest on disaster risk management. No? For one, it may not be monetary or financial in nature, but of course, the first one is saving lives. Why? Because if we have our safe waste management practices and we can do it faster, we can um, um, respond and recover faster. So I think it's a good news for everyone if everyone can recover and respond to disasters very quickly. That's for one. Second, is of course to minimize risks. I think it's a battle cry for the four of us here, and maybe even you, Lenny, and Glenn, and Dr. Kalonji, that through effective disaster waste management, we can really minimize risk to human health and even to life in general. So that's I think an important incentive as well. And lastly, by having this effective disaster waste management practices, we can minimize creating new risks or avoid creating new risks. So, and of course, in the umbrella of the international agenda for disaster risk reduction, we know that one of our major goals really is to make sure that aside from reducing our risks, we have to make sure that we avoid creating new ones by by neglecting some sectors like disaster risk management.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos. Dr. Fernandez, would you care to add?
Nothing to add from my side, Lenny.
Okay, thank you very much. So we actually received a couple of questions, so we will get back to those who sent in those questions if we can. Unfortunately, we are really running out of time. At this point, help me welcome Professor Gretchen Kalonji as she gives the closing message. Professor Gretchen Kalonji is currently the Dean of the Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction of Sichuan University and the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Previously, she was the Assistant Director General for Natural Sciences at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris, France. Professor Kalonji is the co-chair of the Alliance of International Science Organizations on Disaster Risk Reduction. Professor Kalonji, good afternoon. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lenny. First of all, I want to say that the presentations were fantastic. I really want to congratulate the four speakers because they were rich in content and very well organized. As I understand it, it's been recorded so we can share it with a much broader audience. So really exceeded my already high expectations. So thank you very much for organizing this event. I would also like to thank the co-organizers, the city of Makati in principle, because it's a great honor to be greeted by the mayor. And then, of course, there are partner universities, Ateneo, Kyoto, Institute of Crisis Studies in Nepal, and also UNEP contributed a great deal. So we're very, very grateful to all of those participants. And of course, most importantly, the APN for providing financial support. So thank you all very, very much. I just want to stress, very briefly that our institute is very dedicated to continuing to develop this theme of disaster waste management. It's not only because it's a really important topic, as we all know, but also speaking with my dean hat on, is because it's a great topic to build interdisciplinary research and educational collaborations. To solve these problems, we need students from engineering, science, social science, medicine, given all the medical waste. And so it's a great venue for us to build the new kinds of teams that will transform our universities to be more effective in the future. And lastly, I just want to say that after this wonderful event, let's not lose touch with each other. Let's build an ongoing network so that we can continue to create stronger links. The sharing of lessons across national boundaries is extremely, extremely important. And I guarantee you that we at IDMR will be happy to work to make these collaborations stronger in the future. Originally, they were supposed to be face-to-face meetings, but because of COVID, we couldn't do that. But God willing, we'll be able to do that in the future and maybe invite you to Chengdu for a follow-up workshop. But please, 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 let's stay in touch and build on the success of this great event. So, Dr. Linney, I thank you for your wonderful moderation. And of course, Glenn, thank you for spearheading this initiative within IDMR.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalanchi, for those kind words. And we look forward to maybe creating a network one day in the future. Okay, so that
maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Or it
Okay.
should have started yesterday.
I have to go for student interviews now. Sorry, but please continue your question.
Thank you
and
very
answer.
much.
I have to go for student
Thank you.
interviews.
Thank you,
So,
Professor. Thank you.
That formally concludes our webinar on disaster waste management experience of 4 countries. We are extremely grateful for Mayor Abby Binay for opening this event, and of course for Professor Kalanji for her closing message. We would like to express our heartfelt thanks again to all the speakers for their insightful presentations. We would like to again thank the project collaborators, City Government of Makati, IDMR, Ateneo de Manila University, Kyoto University, and the Lautoka City Council. To other participants from all over the world, we are happy to have this platform to share with you these lessons on disaster waste management. We truly appreciate your participation today. We have provided a link to the post-webinar evaluation. We would highly appreciate you kindly completing it so that we can get your feedback. Again, thank you very much, everyone, and we apologize for extending beyond the proposed schedule. We hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you, and
Thank you
goodbye.
so much. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.